Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy here, for Nerds by Nerds, and I'm hanging out with some of the Nerdarchy crew.
Ryan.
I'm Ted.
And we're going to talk about making random encounters cool. So, somebody left a comment on one of our videos about how they prefer planned encounters over random encounters because they're always more interesting. And I feel like that's a complete perception thing. And not only that, random encounters are just that. They're random. They can be anything. They can be role playing. They can be meeting NPCs or monsters to role play with. It could be a hazard to overcome. It could just be a weird thing, or it could be a monster. And not only that, I got the impression that they're thinking like, okay, well, if it's a random encounter, it means both of you guys come around the corner and you're there. Fight. And it just doesn't have
Diplomatize.
Yeah. And it just doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
In my opinion, the only real difference in a random encounter and a planned encounter is, you set up these encounters that people are going to do at a specific time. Random encounters can happen anytime. Right. Generally, if you're using random encounters, you're probably going to make your own charts and tables, and they're going to be specific to regions and things of that nature. Because I don't think we actually have them in the book right now. They have like samples, but it's not actually like every terrain. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to kind of make up the encounters anyway. And what they are, it could literally be you come across a glade and there's bodies strewn about. There could be a merchant encounter where you find the merchant and his wagon and you guys could talk or whatever, or it could be you find the merchant and he's dead.
Well, I mean, so all these so-called random encounters too, though, they're all like they're plot seeds, because the players are going to get curious what this thing. Although here's the danger: what they were doing seems less urgent than the random encounter that you just rolled up. Now the adventure becomes the random encounter.
It's fine,
but you've just set yourself up to have to wing like basically the night's adventure if it happens too early.
Well, there's several ways you can handle that. One is you have a conclusion in your mind when you do it, so you're going to wing it, and it's not going to go that long, or you're going to go in another direction. I don't find a problem with that. My story is not so great that it can't change. Like, I'm no R.A. Salvatore or Stephen Bruce.
But I'm just saying that like you did at least have a story, and now like this whole like just randomized thing, and the players are now obsessed with it.
And there's always going to be consequences if the players don't get back to the primary story arc.
Who's to say?
But what if the random thing actually seems more crucial? Like, oh, we were trying to get like this spice for this tea or something like that this wizard wants, but holy shit, a field of dead bodies and they're burned. Like that becomes like somebody just massacred this small village.
Okay, so then the players go off on that.
Does that sound like an uninteresting encounter to you though?
No, but random.
All right, so now the players, they go off to try and find out, who murdered this. How did this all happen? Well, now the wizard, who has possibly paid some kind of upfront fee to these adventurers, they're not succeeding on their task. Well, now the wizard is hiring another group of adventurers to go find a spice and hiring somebody else to come after these guys because they failed in their mission.
Or the wizard that they were getting the tea for, like he sent those people to get tea. They didn't bring the tea back for him, so he nuked them. So the players are gonna find out this guy is serious about his tea.
He cares a lot about tea.
He needs him some ginseng, son.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, all right, but like
you've just woven both things back together now. Though.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to say. You can very much do that. Suppose they're looking for bandits or something, and they find a pile of dead bodies instead. Well, it could very well have been the bandits that did it. It could be like you can probably weave it back in, and just because they didn't take route A to get to point C doesn't mean route B won't just lead to C anyway, because guess what? They have no idea what's on the other side of that screen.
Well, and then again too, like
free choice isn't always free.
You can always I dubbed that like the GM as master illusionist. Just like they all think that they chose that path because really they did, but it made sense in the story and their characters' motivations were there for them to do that thing. But I just totally lost my actual thread. Oh, what I was going to say, I just remembered. So instead of rolling your random encounters at the table, why not roll them while you're doing your prep? And like, oh, that's interesting. Let me put that in. Like, so your random encounter becomes a planned encounter, but you arrived at it by random operations, by rolling. because
I like Dave's way. You usually have like the note cards of possible options. There's some things that are combat, some things that are not supposed to be combat, and woe to the party if they do.
Traditionally, the way traditionally the way random encounters would work is, regardless of what you're doing, right? Whether you're crawling through a dungeon, going over the hills, or traversing the swamp, X amount of time passes. The DM rolls a random roll to see if there's an encounter
with the black dragon.
Well, that's a second roll.
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
Yeah, right.
Because
if the encounter happens, then you roll to see if it's a black.
No, actually, all roads lead to the black dragon.
Really... Well, that could happen as well. Yeah. But so whatever you decide, there's a 1 in 6 chance that there's an encounter. You roll it. You roll the 1, then you roll in your random encounter table, and whatever that thing is. Or you just pick something, to be honest with you, if it seems more appropriate at the time, and then that's what happens, and that's pretty much how it was done in first edition, second edition, and then third edition they kind of started moving away from that with the planned CR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I feel like the random encounter thing works best for more seasoned GMs. Just because like they can pull an encounter out of their butt, whereas like if you're a fairly new dungeon master, like it might be hard to run that encounter on the fly and have it be interesting. So maybe you do predetermine your roles, so you just know, and you know that like, all right, I want to have it because it lets you like read up on the monsters and be able to know how to run them well. Because like if that black dragon happens, like you need to know how to run a dragon.
That's where your best friend becomes note cards.
Yeah.
And like obviously you don't want to do this for everything, but if it's an area that they're going to be traversing often, then you could totally just make up the table and then just have the note cards available for you, so you don't have to do it on the fly. It's kind of planned out. And and as far as like the encounter itself making it interesting, like I said, it's not automatically going to be you come around the corner or somebody's surprised.
Well, what
ambush.
What I would do in that situation, as far as like having in your back pocket maybe some terrain if it's going to be a combat encounter, just steal some maps from the internet, like find maps that are in the terrain that you're going to be running in. So you find like 5 to 6 maps that are woodland type of interesting woodland encounters. Print those out or whatever, or have them on your laptop that you run. And in this way you have an impromptu encounter map. Like, oh, this is interesting. It's better than, just a wide open field. You got some terrain, some blocking terrain, and this and that, and it'll make for an interesting encounter just on the fly.
Well, not only that, like the encounter could happen and like you could be a mile away from the thing.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whether it's a tower in the middle of nowhere, but whether it's an overturned wagon, whether it's a monster that they see off in the distance and they can choose to investigate it or not, because they got to get the spice for the tea for the wizard
for the tea, yeah.
So that giant figure off in the distance, they might just totally ignore it.
Right. And hope it ignores them.
Right. Or, try and sneak by. Hopefully they didn't notice them. Oh, and, you could always just jot that down as a note because maybe that's an issue later because, you know what, now there's an ogre that lives,
it's marauded the village because they didn't intercept it.
Could be that as well.
Yeah.
You could definitely be the consequence. Again, but that, that comes into the same thing of you have to be careful because then you don't want your PCs to try and go after everything because of the consequences they now fear.
Right.
Well, I mean, you want to balance it, but you do want to have a sense of like, well, sometimes that their choices absolutely do have consequences, and not every single monster encounter. But if it's a predatory monster or a malicious monster in the region of civilization, like, well, yeah, if it's not harming them, it probably is going to harm someone else. And at some point in time,
you could also spin it different. Like the thing absolutely tried to maraud the village, and
somebody else,
other people kill it, and they're like showing off the treasure.
Yeah, all the coin that he had. Yeah, and they're like, if only.
Yeah. It's like, damn, that could have been ours.
Yeah. Or actually, this other adventuring band gets raised up as being like bigger heroes in the party.
Yeah.
Like, so they like just totally like outshine the fight PCs.
Thunder, yeah.
Oh,
that would be fucking hilarious. Like, yeah, I mean, you guys are good and all, but you're no Jandar the Incredible and his band of heroes.
His band of ogre slayers.
That's right. They become the ogre slayers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to make a random encounter interesting, are there components, are there pieces that we feel that will aid in that, or is it just
Well, yes, you have to find ways to build tension. And one of those is, off in the distance. One of those is,
Crashing through the trees.
Yeah,
that could absolutely be a way to
basically
build tension.
anything that it's any good description is going to sort of invoke the senses. It's going to be smell, sight, hearing, whatever.
It could be too. It could be your players going, well, what's around me? Are there deadfalls? Are there logs? Or anything? And you're like, sure, why not?
Yeah. So you wanna invoke the senses, as Ryan says. You want to describe it. Visually. Give them something to really draw them in to what's going on. And you can make a random encounter just as interesting or compelling as a planned encounter, just with a little bit of prep or just the basic know-how.
Well, essentially, it has the same elements as a planned encounter, except for you're doing it on the fly.
Right. And so a great thing to throw in as a random encounter is just like the natural fauna of the region. Mm-hmm. So you have your players drop checks because, of course, every single player knows when they're dropping checks, combat's about to happen and initiative's about to happen, but it was just a deer hopping through the woods, or just a little wee bunny that you notice chittering 50 feet away.
An interesting colored flower that's unique to this region.
Right. And then you've at least once in your game, once in your session, you've debunked the players having a combat encounter right after they make a check. And that there's actually a great utility in that, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, rolling dice behind the screen is another thing that you can do as a DM. Yeah. I've done it plenty of times. Anymore, I tend to roll in front of my PCs, and
Well, no, I mean, but you should roll just so they think that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
you can absolutely grab them, roll them behind the screen. What are you rolling over there? Don't worry about it.
Well,
points.
Another thing too is there's that monster, the Scarecrow, that we did a video on, in the Monster BFFs, and sometimes you should just have the Scarecrow just be a normal, regular ass Scarecrow. Well, all the players are panicked and thinking it's that monster after they encounter.
Well, yeah, say you want to use a Scarecrow encounter, and they just spent the last 3 days walking through fields with Scarecrows.
Yeah.
So when the one, after a couple of days of that, they're like, all right, I guess they're just Scarecrows, and that's when you hit them with the Scarecrow. That's not just a Scarecrow.
Right. Yep.
But evil incarnate with Sturgis. So it doesn't have to be a planned encounter to be interesting. Sometimes, your random encounters can be as interesting or more interesting, and it can springboard a whole new adventure.
Well, you really don't know what the players are gonna, sink their teeth into.
It's like, how many times do you introduce the toss-off NPCs that the players keep coming back to? Like, we've talked about this before in another video. It's the idea of this one-off NPC that for some reason the players gravitate to him and they want to know more about him. The same thing could happen with your random encounter. It was a toss-off encounter that it's like, all right, my players are fully invested in this, and I have to now do an adventure based off of this random encounter.
And as many times, the players feed you what it is they're interested in. And if that's a plot hook they're interested in following, well, then give it to them.
Or what if the players are just talking about stuff while you're thinking of random encounters,
and you pull it from that,
and you just draw from that? Like, absolutely, there's a werewolf right here.
Yeah.
Everyone knows there's werewolves where wolfsbane grows. Just because one of your players are talking and that's what they were talking about, or they heard a rumor and then made it up. Basically giving players agency in your world and letting them create things that weren't really there anyway. There's a huge payoff for doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they've just applied a brushstroke to the canvas of your world. Yeah.
Well, and then what that really does is it gets them invested in your world and interested.
It's like, dude, man, I totally predicted that. They're gonna go to their other friends who weren't at the game table and be like, man, this happened, and I said this, and I was totally right.
So right. Yeah. And it's like, because you just gave me that piece of information. Thanks, buddy. Yeah. It's all comes down to rewarding the thing that your player came up with.
Yeah, I think this mentality too comes from the idea of planned encounters versus random encounter. Is like a lot of GMs, they have their story they want to tell, and they get so wrapped up in telling their story they forget to tell that it's really about telling. It's really about telling the players' stories. You know, they're the main characters in the book, the novel. We're not. We just facilitate it. You know, that's it. We're more like editors.
I mean, that's so true. But I mean, this is a little out of the scope. But like when you're making adventures, like you come up with villains, and you're like, this is a cool idea. How do I make this thing run afoul of my players so that they'll want to deal with it?
The other philosophy is more like it's cooperative. You know, you're providing stuff as much as the players are providing. So you're all playing like a cooperative board game as you're delving into the story, and you're feeding bits and pieces while they're feeding bits and pieces, and together you make the story.
Spelunking in the story cavern.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's exactly how you make, you know, random encounters interesting. Is you take their feedback and insert it, so you don't have to think about it as much. You know, if you're describing interesting scenery. Or maybe even one of the players have been through here before, so you let them describe it,
right?
And then the random encounter happens. Well, that thing is there because they just said it was there because they've been there before.
Yeah,
right. Like when in my game with the Gobblos, like I introduced basically an undead circus that they used to be a part of. And they're like, well, what's his name? I'm like, I don't know. You tell me. You were the one in the circus.
They came up with some hilarious names.
Yeah.
It was pretty good. Or like if your players are wandering through the forest that one of them grew up around, like, hey, there's that tree that you carved. You know, the initials of like your sweetheart at the time or whatever. And they find that that's a random encounter. This tree that like they remember from years ago, and they have these memories linking to.
And now it turns out it's a Trent, and it's angry because you carved into it.
Yeah. It became an awakened tree. And
Dude. Yeah. You realize I can't get rid of this.
Yeah, it's like a tattoo.
yeah, really bad tattoo.
Do you really think I care about L loves L?
Yeah.
Grr. So, you know, basically, you know, that's our take on random encounters. You can, you know, there's tons of ways to spice them up. It's just like a planned encounter, only you just making it up as you went. You know, you throw some interesting pieces of terrain to work around. Yeah, you build tension, you know, either by surprising the players or basically having the monster or thing off in the distance. It could even stalk them for a while. You know,
they'll have to get a restraining order, and it's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. Yeah. You know, the players, you can let them make, you know, they can know they're being stalked, and they can make plans and try and look for this thing or that thing, whereas a defensible position. And you know what? The worst case scenario is that night you didn't get to the thing you were trying to do, and something else came of it. As long as everyone has fun, it doesn't matter, in my opinion.
I agree.
So
okay.
Go ahead.
So what do you guys think? You know, are you for or against random encounters? Go ahead and continue the discussion down below. While you're doing that, feel free to click like, share, even subscribe.
You can hang out with us over on Facebook.
Hey, and we got a website called nerdarchy.com. Check it out.
So until next time, stay nerdy.